Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Thursday. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. It really does mean a lot to have your support. But as usual, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know exactly how my trading went. So let's get right into today's recap. And as you guys can see from the screen, right, and the only thing I was day trading was SQQQ and TQQQ like normal. And I profited $51 on TQQQ and took a $7 loss on SQQQ, right? So I was up $44 on the day, wasn't able to hit my 1% daily goal. But at the same time, I'm just grateful that I was able to end green on the day. And so these are all my field orders for your reference. You guys can see I started trading at 6:30 and I didn't stop trading until 7:21. So I only traded for about an hour today. And the main reason for that is I knew I had stuff going on in the morning, so I wasn't actually just going to be able to sit here and watch the market all morning. But let me go ahead and explain to you guys what I saw going on. So, during the pre-market session, the Nasdaq was indicating signs of an uptrend, right? It was trading between the top and the middle VWAP, forming higher highs and higher lows, right? So what that indicated to me was direction was bullish, at least pre-market, right? Doesn't mean it has to hold, but it was a good indicator that this thing could potentially uptrend. And so right at market open, what did we see going on? The Nasdaq started to actually sell off for a bit, so I entered SQQQ, but as you guys can see, this thing ended up bouncing, so I decided to cut my trade there. And that's how I incurred that $7 loss on SQQQ, right? But once I saw this thing finally break above the EMA and the momentum was there, I pretty much did the same thing as I've been doing all week, right? I would wait for a new candle to form. Once I saw it, really start to form a green candle, I would buy in, start to size up and try to cut it at areas that I felt were smart, right? Approaching, closer to resistance level. And so as this thing continued to uptrend, what you guys will notice is this thing, pretty much ripped on the day. It was just going, pretty ballistic all day, forming these higher highs and higher lows. So that's pretty awesome to see. But what you guys will notice is that as this thing was uptrending, there were lots of red candles on the way up, right? It wasn't just clear cookie cutter, lots of green followed by consolidation, and then, potentially forming higher lows and higher highs. But what we saw was this thing would consolidate before continuing to uptrend. And on these red candles, there were so many today that they honestly just kept having me, give away my profit pretty much that I was making on the way up. As these red candles would form, they would end up pulling back kind of aggressively. And so I ended up having to size down and, give back some of the profit that I was making because of these red candles. And so ultimately, that's just what I kept doing, right? Every time this thing would pull on back, I would end up having to cut losses and then start to ride it back up, cut losses, start to ride it back up. So it was a very back and forth day for me, and it was, kind of frustrating to say the least, but at the same time, I'm just grateful that we were able to end green on the day. And so I stopped trading right around 7:21, so right around this area. And the main reason for that is after all this back and forth of making profit, giving it back, making profit, giving it back, right? I ended up, being able to ride this thing up for the last, few trades that I took for the day. And ultimately, I decided to cut it after this thing ended up pulling on back. And I just cut it there. I felt like it was too choppy for me around these areas where it didn't necessarily want to just rip. It kept on pulling on back. And, I kept getting, and I kept giving back profits. And so I decided to just call it there. But there was obviously more money to be made. This thing continued to uptrend. And, but just because I missed out on the day trading doesn't mean that I was necessarily devastated, because of the fact that, as you guys can see, all of my swing trades are focused, they're very tech focused, right, is what I mean. And so because of that, as they were rallying on the day and it was bringing the Nasdaq up, right, it just makes sense that if the Nasdaq ends green on the day, that the stocks I'm in, which are tech focused, are also green, right? So that's how I was able to make more profit on the day other than my trading, right? Tesla itself did have a really nice day today, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. But, right, in terms of what actually was happening, this thing was very clearly uptrending on the day, right? Was having some pullbacks along the way, but, it was having a nice rally before it ultimately ended up consolidating, right? So pretty much past 9 o'clock, this thing was just trading sideways. It was pretty choppy, and so probably not the best time to trade past 9 o'clock, right? But, that just goes to show that, although direction can be clear during some parts of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to hold, right? This thing just turned choppy all of a sudden past 9 o'clock. So people could have been sitting there just pretty much wasting their time unless they saw value in it and were able to profit on the way down and then started to go back up, right? But it was just trading sideways. Not the best time to trade, in my opinion. But, on a big day like today, it's important to ask yourself, why did the Nasdaq push up so much the way it did, right? As you guys can see, this thing had a pretty solid green bar today. And so it's always important to understand why that is. And so there were some reports that came out, as you guys can see, the initial claims report. So what is initial claims reports? It refers to the government report on the number of workers applying for unemployment benefits for the first time following job loss, right? And so what was prior reported, right, in the past initial claims report was 216,000 people filed, right, in initial claims. What was expected was 220,000 now, right? But what was actually reported was 225,000 initial claims, right? And so why would if there were more people filing for initial claims, why would that cause the market to shoot up, right? Doesn't that sound like it doesn't make sense at all, right? Because this thing was rallying on the day after being reported that there was more people reporting, having to pretty much file for initial claims. And so in these types of bear markets, there's a common saying that bad news is good news and good news is bad news, right? What do I mean by that? Well, the Federal Reserve has constantly been having interest rate hikes, right? They've been raising the interest rate in order to combat inflation and try to slow down the economy, right? And so if they're expecting another additional 4,000 people to file for the initial claims, but there was an extra 5,000, right, that they weren't expecting, what is that telling them? Well, that's pretty much telling the Federal Reserve that because of the fact that they are raising the interest rates, it's having their intended effect of starting to slow down the economy, right? More people are filing for initial claims than expected means, the interest rate hikes are doing their job, right? That's what the Federal Reserve, in their eyes, must be thinking once they see this type of data reported. And so because of the fact that it's having the intended effect, not only is it having the intended effect, it's having more of an effect than they, were anticipating. This could be a good indication for them in the future when they will have to raise interest rates for them to not raise it as aggressively, right? So that's definitely a good sign for the market, and that's why you did see the market react the way it did overall, right? I don't know if you guys are invested in Tesla at all, but as you guys can see, right, it did have a nice recovery today. It has been bleeding the past few days, but as you guys can see, it was up over 8% on the day. And, it's a very good day for Tesla, and I ended up looking into it to, see why this thing was shooting up the way it did. Even though the Nasdaq, was uptrending, this thing did shoot up a significant amount. And, what I was pretty much finding were articles that were saying that Elon Musk ended up, telling Tesla workers to not worry about the stock price and that he thinks long term, right, Tesla will be the most valuable company in the world, right? So that's definitely obviously something nice to hear for investors finally. So that's probably why we did see, the bullish run that we did see it have. And so it is exciting news, right? I personally am a big fan of Tesla and Elon, and I see lots of value in the company long term. That's why I am holding shares. And so with the full self-driving capability, I think that could be huge for Tesla. I think they're the closest electric vehicle manufacturer to be able to pull it off, right? Elon states he thinks they're the closest, and I think that he obviously knows the industry very well. And so that's just my 2 cents on Tesla itself and the Nasdaq overall, how it ended up doing. But it's just cool to see that although there was bad news being reported, the market did have a nice little rally here, right, just in time for that Santa Claus rally for the last week of December, right, of 2022. So definitely nice to see that. But we do have to, be aware that every single time it's broken above the EMA on the 180 day, it's eventually had a very aggressive pullback, right? So we did break above it. We could see some consolidation. Wouldn't surprise me if there was a sell-off, but doesn't have to happen, right? People are expecting a Santa Claus rally. Doesn't mean it has to happen, but that could be, a factor that ends up, leaving the Nasdaq bullish the next few days. But as I mentioned, we just need to take it day by day, because every single time it's broken above the EMA, it tends to sell off. So that's what I'm going to be looking out for tomorrow. But I do appreciate your time and for you guys tuning into the recap today. If you guys have any questions at all, go ahead and drop a comment. If you want me to break down any stock indicator, just drop a comment and I will be more than happy to make a video on it. But that's pretty much everything for today. I will be posting a recap tomorrow, and I hope to see you guys then. Take care and have a good rest of your day.